Welcome, GOAT Format Duelists. We have got a exciting duel review for you today. We've got Simon up top, piloting Reasoning Gate versus MonsterSlayer, piloting Chaos Control. MonsterSlayer is currently the #1 ranked player on the dueling book ladder. Spoilers, Simon does make quite a few mistakes, although I'm not really surprised. If you saw my GOAT Format tier list video, easiest to hardest, a while back, I did classify Reasoning Gate as one of the hardest decks to play in GOAT format, and there's a reason for that. Let's get started here. Welcome to GOAT Duels. I'm ACP, and just remember, guys, this is all educational. These mistakes that Simon makes in the game, these are common mistakes that a lot of Reasoning Gate players make, and this is why Reasoning Gate is not such a popular deck in GOAT format, although it did just win a tournament recently. If you're thinking about playing Reasoning Gate, you're going to want to keep watching here, learn from other people's mistakes so you don't make them. Let's get started. Alright, so MonsterSlayer starts off with set Sengen, set Decree, set Book of Moon. As a pure default, I don't really like setting two Unchainable Traps turn 1 against an unknown deck. With this Book of Moon, basically the only thing we're really going to want to hit turn 1 is Breaker, but then it's like by setting 2 we lose out to Heavy Storm. Obviously, like, we don't want to Book of Moon 1,000 Eyes, right? Like, we got Sengen set. So that's not something that we're concerned about. We don't need to protect against a Blade Knight, right? We have Sengen set. So, yeah, I would really like to see this Book of Moon in the hand, but it's fine. And this build of Chaos Control that MonsterSlayer is running, it is a little spicy. I mean, we got the Kaiku in the main deck. Does have synergy with some Decree, to be fair. So that's kind of an interesting choice. All right, so right off the bat, this is actually a decision I want to talk about a lot because this comes up again. This is not a mistake that Simon makes once. So, you know, the most important fundamentals of Reasoning Gate are essentially that, despite what some people say, Reasoning Gate is an OTK deck. Now, does that mean that it's possible to win without OTKing? It can happen, but 90% of the time, not going to happen. The issue that I have here is that Reasoning Gate is not only an OTK deck, but it's an OTK deck where we can afford to draw and pass a few turns because we have Scapegoat. Scapegoat, in my mind, is, I don't want to say the best card in Reasoning Gate, but it does a lot because it's an enabler for Monster Gate, and it allows you to stop damage and use your life points as a resource to accumulate more resources. So what I would like to see is just set Scapegoat and pass, and just kind of draw and pass for a while. Because keep in mind, MonsterSlayer doesn't know the matchup yet, right? He doesn't know that, like, oh, I need to push for damage, get Simon under 2,000, you know, because of Dimension Fusion. So especially in Game 1, when neither player knows the matchup, just setting Scapegoat, and, you know, you might take a few Sengen hits, right? You might take a few hits with Sengen, go down to 6,000 or 5,000, use Scapegoat if MonsterSlayer gets more aggressive with Kaiku, and just OTK on, like, turn 5 or something. Killing on turn 5 is quite fast by GOAT format standards, and yet I see people sort of wanting to just use all of their resources on turn 1. And like, the best case scenario, I think, for this reasoning, the absolute best case scenario is MonsterSlayer doesn't call level 4, you flip into a Sacred Crane, also mill a Chaos Sorcerer off the reasoning, then maybe Monster Gate the Sacred Crane into another Sacred Crane, tribute for Jinzo, and then banish Light and Dark for BLS banish monster, attack for 24 with Jinzo. That's like the absolute best case scenario. Obviously, this reasoning and the Monster Gate, neither of them can flip into a DMOC because that's in our hand. We obviously could do some crazy things if this was in our deck, but it's not. So our output is fairly limited. But if we set Scapegoat, and again, just take a couple of Sengen hits, maybe stop some damage from Kaiku, all of a sudden, you know, maybe there's a turn where we have like 1 or 2 GOAT tokens left. We draw, we activate Reasoning, our opponent maybe calls it correctly, doesn't call it correctly, then we can Monster Gate the GOAT token, and at this point we'll have more cards in our hand. We'll have like a Dimension Fusion in our hand, we might have like a Giant Shreddate in our hand, and we're probably just going to kill our opponent. But because we're using this Reasoning now, regardless of what it flips into, our opponent will probably have some way to deal with. And then now this is one less resource when we want to go off later. So the opponent did call level 4. We flip into Sinister. I don't really like Sinister in Reasoning Gate. I know some people play it, but there's a reason that winning deckless of Reasoning Gate never have Sinister in them. It's because it doesn't really help you OTK your opponent. Like, yes, you can get some value, like, oh, I'm going to Monster Gate my Sinister, and then I'm going to meta my Sinister, whatever, but, like, Reasoning Gate is not about getting value. Obviously here, you know, we kind of just went 1 for 1, right? We didn't, you know, we just effectively summoned Jinzo for free, which isn't terrible, but again, it's, you know, Sangan here is probably just going to get the Sinister. Okay, got Cyberjar. So Simon here draws into a Sacred Crane, just attacks into the card that he knows is probably Cyberjar. So here, the Cyberjar resolves. Cyberjar resolving, I'd say, generally good for Simon on average, because now you just have 5 more cards. You probably want to activate this Upstart before you Snatch Steal, just because the card that you draw might change the play. In this case, we try to Snatch the Kaiku, it gets booked. And then we main phase 2, summon Thousand Eyes. And take the breaker. I don't know what this is about, where we're setting an Upstart Goblet. I mean, I get that maybe you don't want to have 7 cards in your hand, but first of all, I actually think we do want to have 7 cards in our hand, because we could discard Dark Magician of Chaos in the end phase, and then if we draw Dimension Fusion, keep in mind, we haven't milled a Dimension Fusion this whole game. So if we draw Dimension Fusion, now we can banish Dark Magician of Chaos to our BLS, activate Dimension Fusion, win the game. You know, I think the problem here, fundamentally, is that Simon is not trying to play the correct game. Like, he is trying to play the card advantage game. And yes, like, Simon has gotten a little bit of card advantage. We did get 2 uses out of the Sinister. We Monster Gated it and we meted it. So yes, we technically did go +1 with the Sinister, but this deck doesn't care about that. Like, as someone who's played Reasoning Gate a lot, I've won plenty of games where I go off in a turn where my opponent's up +4, right? I start the card with 6 cards to my opponent's 10, and then I kill them, right? I mean, this deck basically doesn't care about card advantage at all, in the sense that it doesn't really care how many cards your opponent has. It only cares how many cards that it has, and whether or not we can convert that into an OTK. So this Thousand Eyes play, fine, but again, he's setting Upstart because he's thinking, well, I don't want to have to discard a card in my end phase and go -1, but going -1 is entirely irrelevant to this deck. So first of all, I would activate Upstart Goblin like a normal person, and Upstart Goblin draws you into whatever. In the end phase, discard D-Mock, and that already puts us in a great play. So yeah, Simon, again, I think he's pretending that Reasoning Gate is like a GOAT control deck, and it's not. So we draw the Thunder Dragon, and we Graceful. And then we duo our opponents, get whatever we get. You know, in this case here, D-Mock got discarded anyway to duo, but, you know, Simon didn't know that was going to happen, of course. And, yeah, now we use the BLS to get rid of the Thousand Eyes. There are other options, like we could Book of Moon the Thousand Eyes, and then save the BLS, potentially. We are going to banish the Sinister, I would imagine, but We want to banish the Sinister and the 2 Chaos Sorcerers, but leave the other things in there just in case there's a Dimension Fusion waiting in the wings. So yeah, we use those goats, block the hits, and now we've got 2 monster gates, right? That's kind of what we want to be doing. But again, if we were in this situation where we have 2 goats, 2 monster gates, and a reasoning, our opponent would just be super dead. Most likely. Most likely. And yeah, some reason gate decks play the 1 Fusler. I don't really like that unless you're kind of building around it with cards like Limiter Removal and, 3 Metamorphosis. Here, I don't necessarily know the exact list that we're on. I also want to mention Simon did forget to add Sinister to his hand in his standby. Now, it might not matter, but we have a Lightning Vortex, and being able to discard Sinister to Lightning Vortex and getting value out of it 3 times would be preferable. So, yeah, we'll see what happens here. So, Simon has no cards in deck left, so he has to try to win this turn. And we Lightning Vortex, discard a card that's, well, not Sinister, I guess. Looks like we're going to just discard Meta and then go summon, attack. Yeah, and then now MonsterSlayer gets to book the BLS and live, and then now Simon can't draw next turn and loses. It was definitely kind of a strange game. We had the Cyberjar helping out both players, but possibly helped Simon out a little more by giving him more resources. But yeah, I would have liked to see Simon be more conservative in terms of committing monsters to the board, but then be less conservative with cards like Upstart Goblin and being willing to discard in the end phase. We go on to game 2. It's interesting that MonsterSlayer, I imagine, is probably playing Morphing Jar and Cyberjar, and presumably at least didn't side out the Morphing Jar, because we see it in the hand. I think that is very risky, just because cards like Morphing Jar and Cyberjar tend to help out the combo player more than the control player. That's just how drawing 5 cards fundamentally works. And again, we see this here is a massive mistake. Keep in mind, it is turn 1, you're going first, it is impossible for you to attack, obviously, because those are the rules of the game. So this reasoning, again, Dark Magician Chaos is in our hand, so you're not going to summon that. This reasoning is incredibly counterproductive. Like, I don't even know what the best case scenario is. If you flip Jinzo, you can't activate your Jar Greed, so you don't even want to flip that. You're not going to flip Fusler, because we saw last game he was only playing 1, so maybe best case scenario, I think we saw Simon was playing Zaborg, so maybe you summon a 2400 Zaborg and, like, say go. But, again, you have no incentive to do that. So, think about it. The easiest way to think about this. Say you're going to summon 5 monsters over the course of the game as a Reasoning Gate player. Would you rather summon 1 monster on turn 1, 1 monster on turn 2, 1 monster on turn 3, and so on? Or would you rather summon 5 monsters on turn 5? Well, clearly we'd rather summon 5 monsters on turn 5 because then we get to kill our opponent. I know that I'm kind of just beating a dead horse at this point, but I really want to hammer this point home. Reasoning Gate is all about saving your resources and then kind of just going off all in one turn. And in this case, MonsterSlayer called for, and we'd flip the Crane. We're taking 1,000 here, which is fine. And activating the Jar in the end phase was definitely good, because you would think MonsterSlayer would side out his decrees, but you have no guarantee of that, so I like that we use Jar in the end phase. We activate Reasoning again. 8 is called. We do flip into Crane. And again, even here, so we're at 7,000. We're at 7,000 life points. We have Snatch Steal, BLS, Fusler, and so on. I would actually like to just see draw Reasoning pass. Just pass with an empty board. So the worst case scenario here if you're Simon and you pass, is next turn your opponent plays a Kaiku, attacks for 28. That would put you at 4,200. 4,200 is more than enough to go off, right? That would even be enough to activate 2 Dimension Fusions, just in case you need to use 2. So that would be fine. Like, yes, you could have some sort of crazy turn happen where MonsterSlayer goes graceful, discard Light and Dark, summon BLS, summon monster, attack you down to less than 2,000. But that's incredibly unlikely. We got to play the odds here. So again, this problem of going activate a reasoning on turn 1, activate a reasoning on turn 2, is that we run out of resources, and then later we just have no fuel to just ever OTK. That is the problem. So now we see the Chaos Control coming into play here. We see the meta for Thousand Eyes taking the Sacred Crane. This is fine. Obviously, we only get to attack for 1,600 every turn. If you're MonsterSlayer, you really hope this face-down card isn't a scapegoat normally, but here we happen to have Token Thanksgiving, which is quite a tech card. I don't know what I think about that. I guess it's good against Burn and then also good against Reasoning Gate. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. And gaining the 3,200 is really nice for MonsterSlayer because it takes quite a lot of effort for Reasoning Gate to do more than 10,000 in one turn. But again, this is why, like, if we'd saved those 2 copies of Reasonings, we would really love them right now if you're Simon, because it's not about now saving resources to do more than 8,000 in a turn. Now we're going to need resources to do more than 10,600 in one turn. And to do that, we really want a lot of copies of Reasoning in Monster Gate. So now MonsterSlayer's in a wonderful position. He's got tons of life. If Simon wants to do anything, he has to deal with the Thousand Eyes. And in terms of card advantage, we're fine too. We've got like 5 cards to our opponent's 5 cards, and we're adding back the Sinister. So again, I would like to just see draw pass. I know I'm just saying the same thing every turn, but the nice thing about our opponent having a Thousand Eyes in play is that it stops his other monsters from attacking. So worst case scenario, we get attacked for 1,600, we go down to 54. As Simon, that's totally fine. And again, now it's like we've used another resource. Remember, Snatch, that's just another OTK tool in our toolbox. So now we've used 2 Reasonings and a Snatch and gotten really no value out of either one. We do attack over the Thousand Eyes. MonsterSlayer forgets the Sinister. I mean, come on. If you're number 1 on ladder, you can't be forgetting your Sinisters, buddy. But the Kaiku's nice, of course. This is one of the matchups that you main Kaiku for. And nope, we don't want to banish anything, right? If we banish 2 Sacred Cranes and our opponent has a Dimension Fusion, we hate our life. Yes, our opponent has 2 copies of Dimension Fusion already gone, but we don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, the safe play is banishing nothing. I definitely agree with that. And yeah, now we're just going to Reincarnation for Fusler. Go Fusler meta. And we attacked for 600 there. And it is possible that this Fusler, or not the Fusler, the King Dragoon could win us the game. I mean, I'm not saying it's likely, but Chaos doesn't necessarily have a ton of outs. But keep in mind, if MonsterSlayer has a Metamorphosis, yeah, the Thousand Eyes won't be able to take the King Dragoon, but it will be able to stop the King Dragoon from attacking. But as Simon, we probably don't mind that if the game kind of stalls for a while. Now we do remember the Sinister. And Sword's Morphing Jar is kind of a good synergy, actually. Stops the Morphing Jar from getting attacked on your opponent's turn. Then on your turn, you can set everything, flip it up. And, yeah, setting some monsters in preparation for this Morphing Jar. Yeah, this all sounds good. We could even, like, do some shenanigans where we flip up Morphing Jar, flip up Tsukiyomi, reset the Morphing Jar. I mean, I don't know why we'd want to, but it is an option. And so I'm not sure if I like this, just because we're wasting our normal summon on Azura. Again, like, on both sides of this matchup, card advantage doesn't really matter. I know people don't like to hear that because it's GOAT format and card advantage is supposed to matter, but in this matchup, it really doesn't matter. So, yes, we are saving a card by normal summoning Azura and flipping Morphing Jar, but it means that if we draw into something that we want to normal summon, say we draw into a second Kaiku, maybe we have some out to this King Dragoon, and then we want to summon Kaiku. Or even just summon Kaiku and say go, right? Now we can't because we've already used our normal summon on Azura. But then if we keep Azura, we can use it to out our opponent's scapegoat, but 2 scapegoats are already gone. So, I don't know. For me, it's like, I don't know if we should be summoning this. I think here it's going to work out just because we don't have anything else we want to normal summon. Well, now we do. See, I would much rather this Azura be in the grave than we can just summon Kaiku and then know that our opponent can't banish something for a Sork or a BLS or what have you. I don't know. It's really minor. It definitely doesn't matter a lot. I know that we just have to discard anyways, right? So, like, we summoned Azura to save us a card, but then because we summoned Azura, we have to discard a card. So it actually didn't save us a card. This Azura is just getting discarded anyways. We also didn't set any other things. Yeah, I don't think we need to set Decree. Something else that I also want to point out is Heavy Storm should have been sided out. If you watch my video on cards that people forget to side out, Heavy Storm versus Reasoning Gate, that was one of the big ones that I mentioned, because what are you trying to Heavy Storm? Chargreave's chainable. Goats is chainable. Okay, you can Heavy Storm exactly 1 torrential. Like, it's a terrible card in this matchup. Heavy Storm's a great card in GOAT format, but bad card in the matchup. You side out Heavy for the same reason you side out Cross out. It's a dead card the vast majority of the time. Just something worth noting. Like that we sided in Karibo, though. And now we just get Heavy Stormed ourselves. Yeah, I guess I agree with that Storm. Like, yeah, we might not OTK, but we've got a True Nade anyways. So yeah, this is kind of just activate Reasoning Gate, see what it gets you. I guess we're getting Sinister. And we have 3 cards left in our deck. So the game's over, essentially. The game's just over because... what other resources do we have? How are we going to go off? I guess if we can draw into a 3rd Dimension Fusion and summon a Chaos Monster, then maybe we could win that way. But when your opponent's at 10,000 and has a Karibo in hand, it's like, yeah, good luck. There's no reason to Karibo here. Like, you're not playing Karibo to gain you 2,400 life. That's not why this card gets sided in. You don't just use it on the first high attack monster you see. Here it's not going to matter because MonsterSlayer is just so massively ahead that he can do almost whatever he wants and he's going to win. But you want to use Karibo to stop an OTK. And this isn't an OTK, so you save the Karibo. Like, your opponent doesn't get a card destruction or something. The Karibo's safe in your hand. He's not going to dust shoot you. The Karibo's safe in your hand. And it's not like we need Karibo in our grave for a dark. We've already got 3 darks, so that's not a concern either. And we forgot our Sinister Serpent again. I mean, again, it's not really going to matter. We've got BLS in our hand. We're just going to kill both these monsters. Breaker isn't super great in the matchup either, but I think you keep it in just because it's a dark with stats. Here we happen to also get value out of the effect. And, yeah. Now the game is just super over because your opponent has 3 cards left in deck with, you know, nothing that you can get. So, yeah, I mean, we've got one part of the combo. We needed Sork plus Dimension Fusion. Problem is we don't have the second part. So, I mean, I guess here we activate True Nade, summon Sork, banish BLS, tribute for Jinzo, attack over Breaker. I would have to imagine that's the play. But now the BLS just gets booked, so it's like, okay, what do you do now? The answer is you're probably screwed. Yeah, so that's it. That was a 2-0. Mainly just wanted to highlight how to play this kind of matchup. And not even really just the matchup, but how to play Reasoning Gate in general. I think Simon fundamentally doesn't understand how to play the deck, and he is far from the only person who doesn't understand how to play the deck. I think if more people knew how to play the deck, we would see a lot more first place finishes from Reasoning Gate. Again, I'm hoping that you all learned something from watching this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. And, by the way, if you want to check out that tier list of easiest to hardest GOAT format decks, go watch this video here. Talks a lot about why Reasoning Gate is so hard to play.